The Bob Murphy Show, episode 465.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, it's Bob Murphy here. I was going to make a joke that it's RFK Jr. subbing in for him, but I don't know what the story is with my voice. This is real. I'm not making a joke. Hopefully it'll be over by the next episode. But I wanted to go ahead and get this out. I interviewed Scott Horton. The news of the day is he's promoting the brand new Scott Horton Academy. The TLDR is if you go to scotthortonacademy.com and register with promo code BOB, don't spell it backwards, B-O-B, before Thanksgiving, then you get 10% off the top. So make sure you do that, and also Scott can see what kind of buying power the Bob Murphy Show demographic delivers. So, joking aside, it's a great conversation. We do more than just talk about his academy. We go down some side paths and whatnot. So it's a good conversation. I learned some stuff about Scott's past that I didn't know before. I think you'll enjoy it. Here we go. The great Scott Horton. Well, Scott, welcome back to the Bob Murphy Show.
Thank you, Bob. Good to be with you again.
So I want to apologize to the front end folks. I am getting laryngitis or getting over it or something, but that's okay because Scott's not afraid to talk. So I'll just point him in the various directions and let him go on some of these topics. So the main thing is, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into the festivities here, Scott? You've got your academy is up and running now, so why don't you tell the folks about that who haven't heard about it?
Yeah, thanks very much. I have, with the help of our good friend Tom Woods, who of course has his own Liberty Classroom. He set this one up for me. It's the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom. As Tom says, it's Scott Horton slowed down. So it's essentially me doing a very long form course on all of our Middle East wars is the main feature there. And the idea being that, you know, as we've seen, whenever a libertarian or an anti-war person goes up against a hawk on any of these shows or in any kind of debate type forum, we always just completely destroy them. And so the thing is, we just need more of us. Mm-hmm. And so the idea here is like a bit of a training academy kind of a thing for people who really want to be a really good anti-war guy and really have our side of the story down pat. Here's where you can go and get the good stuff. And I'll take you through and explain, as I like to do, how one intervention led to the next one and led to the next one and led to the next one and got us all the way where we are now. And time to quit. And now I'm working on editing my second course, which will be on the new Cold War with Russia, the expansion of NATO and the creation of the crisis in Eastern Europe and including the Ukraine war. And so there's that. And then so yeah, again, Tom says it's me slowed down, basically taking you through all of this stuff, trying to get you up to speed as good as I am on all of it. And then, of course, I also have all these other great, hosts or professors, teachers as well, including the great James Bovard on 40 years of investigative journalism on all kinds of different topics, including the TSA and Waco and the war on drugs and all kinds of stuff. Then I got Ramsey Baroud on the reality of the Israel-Palestine conflict from the Palestinian point of view, and William Bupert from the Libertarian Institute, and his course is called Trail of Tears, American Stalemate and Military Defeat Since 1945, and the absolute failure of American militarism in the post-war era. And funny, they call it post-war when it's the perpetual war after that one real big war era.
If only we were post-war.
Yeah, exactly.
We're trying to get to the post-war era.
Exactly. Yes, he goes over all the wars of the post-war era. So that's the start. And then we've got C.J. Kilmer coming up on how Woodrow Wilson is the worst person who ever lived. We've got a Lutheran scholar that Tom found named Adam Francisco, who's going to be debunking Christian Zionism, and not just dispensationalism, but all forms of it, and doing really like a long form entire history of the relationship between Christians, Jews, and now the state of Israel, but going back to antiquity and a history all the way through. I mean, I've looked at his outline and it is really impressive, the course material that he set up to take us through there. So that's
And Scott, just to
hugely
stop you,
valuable.
for people who don't get what that even means, like, because there are some, like, for real folks, like I've seen, this is not a straw man. There are Christians in the United States who think it is our biblical duty, like, you know, God blesses those who bless Israel, and we have to help them. And some even go so far as to say, like, Jesus can't come back until we help the Israelis in their military escapades. Like,
Right.
I wouldn't say it in those words, but I'm not like inventing a straw man. Is that fair?
Yes, there are various degrees and different factions of these kinds of things. So there's, I think, kind of a general belief among some Protestants, as you said, that like you must bless Israel or God will curse you and this kind of thing. Then there's the real premillennialist dispensationalists, which is a more narrow faction of, I think almost exclusively Baptists, but maybe it's some Methodists as well who believe in this. But this is the idea that Israel had to be created and the circumstances of Israel's creation has to be just right in order for Jesus to come back and to fulfill all the biblical prophecies of Daniel and Revelations and all this stuff, which is really like some Branch Davidian kind of stuff, dude. It's pretty crazy. Which I like defending the Branch Davidians from the horrible lies told about them and the horrible things done to them. But their theology is pretty wacky. I thought was agreed at the time. But there's sort of a mainstream version of this, led, I think probably the most famous preacher of this is John Hagee from the Cornerstone Church in San Antonio, who's also the leader of Christians United for Israel, who says that this is how essentially we force Jesus to come back now on our timetable. And, in a way it's all God's will, but in another way we got to tell his will what to do and when, because I guess, nobody wants to die alone. So like, wouldn't it be cool if the whole world blew up and you got to see it? I guess, I don't know. It's kind of a pretty nihilistic take for Protestant Christianity, but that's a huge part of it. And they were manipulated into supporting the wars in the Middle East because get it, millennium, year 2000, Jesus, apocalypse, Armageddon, war, Middle East thing, sign your son up and go over there and fight this thing. And of course, none of the magic kicked in. Everybody got left behind here with the rest of us anyway. And so now I think people are ready to hear like what really is the origin of this stuff and what does the Bible really say about this? What has been the consensus among Christian leaders over the millennia, on these issues? And, the guy's a real scholar. He's from Concordia University. So it's not like this is, I think, of course, Tom is Catholic, but he made sure to get a Protestant to do this.
He had this guy on his show recently, right?
Yes. This is
So I was listening to that, and right. And they were, so for folks at home, again, he could be wrong. And just because church father said something, they could have all been wrong. But the guy goes out of his way, like you say, to not make it some narrative. It's not like just a Catholic thing, like, oh, these Protestant nut jobs. And he goes through and quotes various, Martin Luther and blah, 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 going through.
Yeah, nor is it like an anti-Jewish thing in any way either. It's just a realistic take on, what did Protestant Christians believe about a future state of Israel up to, say, I don't know, 1800, when all these stories started changing based on, new interpretations by particularly American Protestants, some English Protestant leaders too. So yeah, I mean that it is a thing, and it's I think people need the opportunity to know that there are alternative ways of looking at this stuff. And Ted Cruz, I kind of made fun of him for this, but like there's a much more serious like way to interpret this really that like applies to people in the real world. What he said to Tucker Carlson in that interview is he said, "My Sunday school teacher told me." And the thing is like, that's cool and everything for what it is, except but what we're talking about in this case is supporting a foreign nation and its foreign policy in a very real world that causes a lot of pain and grief to innocent people. And so there's there's must be things in your life and in your faith that you learned from your Sunday school teacher about right and wrong and the story of this or that, biblical figure that mattered to you, and that's fine. But at the same time, come on, man, like that was just your friend Jimmy's mom, and she doesn't necessarily know anything more than you know now about it. You were a child, and she was a grown-up. And so, okay, like that's great and all, but she wasn't inspired by the divine whisper of God to explain this to you just perfectly, right? She ain't the Pope and nothing. She's just works. She's like the deacon's wife. She may or may not know anything about this stuff. And she tells you what it says in red writing in the margin of your Bible, as some guy, wrote back in the 19th century, not one of Jesus's disciples wrote it back in the first century, or before it. But like recently, some kook says so, and your Sunday school teacher's very impressed by that. That's great and everything, but you got to be able to reevaluate and wonder whether, if we're talking about my religion says what my nation state has to do for other nation states, I probably need to at least like reevaluate that now that I'm an adult, and like what that actually meant or may have meant, as opposed to just taking Jimmy's mom's word for it from what she told me when I was 7, which
and
is
also, even on its own terms too. Like, I don't want to concede too much. Like, even if we stipulated all that, like, put an analogy like with your brother. So, you're out the bar and your brother's just hammered, and he comes up to you. He's like, "You see that guy over there? That guy's looking at me funny. Let's go kick his ass." And you're like, no, I'm not letting you go and swing at that guy. I'm not backing you up. And then later, like, would it make sense for your parents to yell at you and say, "Why'd you curse your brother like that?" You know what I mean? So it's like, right. Even if you are, locked in arms and someone's your greatest ally or whatever, it doesn't mean if they want to do something really dumb that's bad for their people too, that you go along and support them. Like, it just doesn't follow. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Bless Israel means deliver weapons unto them that they may use any means against their enemies. Like, no, that's not in the Sermon on the Mount, man. I'm sorry. I bit my tongue when I said that. I know how to pronounce an S sound usually. But yeah.
Okay, so I stopped you going through. Was that the last course, or are there other ones?
Oh yeah, no, more coming. I mean, we're going to have courses by Martyr Made. We got as I said, my Cold War course is coming up. We're going to have Martyr Made do a course for us next year. We're going to have more by William Bupert, who he kind of gave an overview of a lot of topics, but he can really nail down a lot of, he's an extremely libertarian guy who also is a real military historian and expert and debunker of mythologies of American militarism, and is just fantastic. So I'll get endless use out of Bupert in this thing. And then, the plan is to have more and more courses into, the new year. I'm not sure what all I can add. I could do a course on Waco, I guess, although, I already have that 13-hour podcast on the thing. So I'm not sure if I can really improve on that, what I already did there. I do have a guy who is the world's greatest expert on the Oklahoma bombing. And we've talked about maybe getting him to do a course at some point. So that's something that's very important to me as well. So we'll be looking at that. And then, I'm a little bit out of sync from doing my radio show, but when I'm back into doing my regular interview show, man, I know so many people who are good on so many things. I mean, I'd love to have Gareth Porter do a course on the first Cold War, which is the book that he's written now, and let him see. I don't know if he'd be interested in that, but maybe if we could get Gareth to do a long form course on that. And then like I got William Hartung and Bill Astore and God dang it, I always forget the third guy. So all always on the tip of my tongue. But not Andrew Coburn, but he's one too. But anyway, these guys were just the experts on like Pentagon spending and accounting and waste and failed weapon systems and all this kind of stuff too. So I think I'd like to do something like that. Maybe get William Hartung. Winslow Wheeler, that's the name I was desperately searching for there. He's the one that calculated that the current military budget is already $1.7 trillion when you add it all up, for real. Get get one of them to do like a real breakdown of American militarism and where all the money's going, something like that. And I don't know, possibilities are endless. I want to get Dan Sanchez to do something on the boom and bust cycle. He's a credentialed Austrian school economist like yourself. And you know me, I'm obsessed with inflation and the boom and the bust. And so I'd like very much for Dan Sanchez to get a course in for us. He's a fellow at the Institute. And then also, you know, I'm open to suggestions too, man. Whatever people think needs a real good deep dive from a very crass and confrontational Hortonian libertarian point of view, man. Let me know.
That's great. Yeah. Cause I mean, for a while, and I'm sure you would agree that like the libertarian, certainly like the Rothbardian wing or whatever you want to call it, it was pretty much economist heavy. And we were really good on economic theory, whatever. And then you'd occasionally have your Ralph Raico or something that would be a nice, you know, seasoning in the mix or something. But and the two really are, you know, kind of go hand in hand. You need to have some background theory to even know how do you interpret, you know, the data or the, you know, the historical records. But on the other hand, like if you were taught when you were a kid that, oh yeah, the Great Depression was caused by unregulated stock speculation, no matter how much you think laissez-faire is awesome, if you think that that's just this brute fact of the world, then you're kind of not going to do much with that. But so anyway, that
sounded like an audition right there for a course on the New Deal and the Great Depression. Do I have a taker? I would love to do that with you, Bob. If you would do it, man, that would be fantastic. I hate FDR and that whole mythology so much. When I first learned about the hoax of what really caused the bubble and the crash at 29, they got us good on that one. They blame freedom, and then they created the whole New Deal, and the whole goddamn, I'm still pissed off. This is like 30 years ago, and I was like, and I still go every time I think about that.
And what's funny too is it's even like more with the Austrian Chicago feud that Milton Friedman finally convinced everyone. Yeah, see the problem, it was the Fed's fault. Because they didn't inflate enough. Right. In 1930. You know? Yeah.
Seriously, man.
So, anyway,
you know, I'm really lucky in this way because I didn't find the Mises Institute, even though Mark Thornton's name is on the back of Jekyll Island. I was like, Ludwig von Mises Institute. It sounds too fancy to be any good, really. You know, I don't know. So I ignored it. But it was Ed Griffin. And Ed Griffin, he's a bit of a conspiracist, and Jekyll Island ain't perfect. But he is a Mises Rothbard guy on money, and his economics are sound. Money is gold. Gold is money. None of this Lincoln Greenback stuff that you get from the populist right sometimes.
It's funny you say that because I forget how, but I mean, I was already steeped in the Austrian tradition when, you know, I'd heard about the creature from Jekyll Island, and then somebody finally, you know, said, oh yeah, you should definitely, that's a classic in our genre. You should check it out. And I kept getting all these warnings though, like he gets into some weird stuff in there, but you know, it's solid. And so I'm reading the thing and I was amazed by like, oh yeah, how Rothbardian this analysis is. And I get to the end of the book and I'm like, where's the weird stuff? Like I was like, yeah. So I guess they meant like the funding both sides of the war or whatever. Like that's what they thought at that point. I was like, yeah, I believe that.
I mean, that book, he does not go very far into conspiracy theory stuff really at all. I think there's a little bit maybe about they're building a one world government or whatever, but not even very much. Most of it is sound. You know, I talked with Higgs about it one day, and Higgs said that it's true about the meeting at Jekyll Island, but it's also true that there were groups of bankers who were trying to establish cartels like this all around the country at that time, in San Francisco and in Texas and in Missouri and wherever. And so there were all different little Jekyll Island meetings going on, and these people kind of all got together and got a piece of the, you know, situation or whatever. He's basically saying that I guess that Griffin wasn't wrong, but just it was more than just the Jekyll Island meeting where they really wrote it up and all of that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Anyways, point being though is that I was reading a lot of Birch stuff, and so as soon as I was introduced really to alternative economics, it was Mises stuff. So I'm really lucky in that way because there are a lot of people who get turned on to some bogus crap. You know what I mean? But by way of Griffin, and I didn't even notice that his footnote is Professor Rothbard explains. I didn't know who Rothbard was. That didn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean? But Griffin got it right. Griffin was my guy and he was right. So I'm lucky. I'm very lucky in that way that I, you know, from the time I was like in, I guess that must've been probably junior or senior year in high school. I was already reading hard money and anti-conspiracy stuff.
So can I actually ask you on that? And sorry, folks, my voice is really going here. did you ever feel hemmed in? I guess what I'm going to say is that, yeah, I was actually surprised when I first got to know you in like, I could like the topics you covered on your show and everything. And that I was so pleasantly surprised that you were, into Austrian economics and were asking me about the boom bust cycle and stuff like that. And why like, artificially low interest rates were a bad deal. Because I guess I would have assumed that you would be kind of a lefty on economic stuff, given your anti-war stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so
No.
did you ever feel out of place? Like, I would probably fit in with the anti-war crowd better, but I got to just do what I think is true? Or is that not even a thing?
Well, look, I mean, I'm an Austinite, right? So you could either be bad on everything or good on everything, basically. Or, I mean, you could just be a right winger or a left winger. But there are a lot of libertarians from around here because we like guns and smoking pot. What's the big deal? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So culturally speaking, we got right wing hippies on motorcycles. Like, you know what I mean? Like gun toting, tough guy botanists. Like it's a strange kind of I don't know what Austin is now. That's the Austin I grew up in.
Right. Okay.
So, I was always too right wing for my left wing friends and too left wing for my right wing friends, if that means anything necessarily.
Yeah, okay.
I would get along with militia guys and Earth First hippies and whatever. My first radio show was on Free Radio Austin, which was a left wing thing. Chaos was more just punk rock, but
and also now that we're talking about it,
yeah.
I think I was partly duped by like the Buckleyites who convinced me that if you're on the right, you have to be for war, like to be a tough guy. And it's those hippie lefties that are anti-war. You know what I mean? Whereas no, like there's
see, again, I'm just lucky, Bob. Like this is not because I'm so smart, man. It's just because I got exposed to these birchers at just the right time. We're like when I was in high school, I was learning some good left-wing anti-government stuff. Like, have you ever seen the Bill Moyers documentary, The Secret Government? And it's all about Iran-Contra and Vietnam and this kind of thing. And it's about
I've heard of it. I don't know if I've watched it.
So it's Bill Moyers, right? So it's what you would expect from him. It's about like Republicans and the military and the CIA doing underhanded stuff, that kind of thing. So I had a good indoctrination in some of that in high school and all that. But then when I started reading the Birchers, well, have you ever read None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen?
I think so.
So
I certainly know what it is, but I think I've read it.
So I read that it's essentially a review of tragedy and hope for the most part, like The Naked Capitalist by Skousen is too. But it's essentially Gary Allen. He's kind of a libertarian, really sort of posing as a right-wing bircher, but he's really kind of one of us. But he's attacking Nixon from the right and saying Nixon is a pinko commie homo. Look at this EPA and the Medicaid and all of this socialism. And this is before Watergate. So it's not about the scandal of Watergate at all. It's just about how Nixon is such a dang liberal Republican, and any good conservative has got to hate him for it. He might as well be a Democrat over there with the Kennedys and them kind of deal. Is
went off cold too.
Yeah. And then that same like crusty old right-wing Nixon is a pinko point of view is like hardcore anti-war and says that American imperialism is actually a commie conspiracy to destroy America. It's the only way to destroy America is to build a world empire that we cannot afford and drive our nation into bankruptcy, our great country of freedom into bankruptcy and destroy what George Washington and all the guys built for us in the first place. And that was the Bircher narrative, like from mid-Vietnam on. And this is what got the Birchers kicked out of the conservative movement. It wasn't that they were conspiracists and anti-communists. It's that they were against the war in Vietnam because Robert Welch decided that he was their leader, decided that we're essentially building a communist state at home in the name of preventing communism overseas. Meanwhile, we're subsidizing the Soviet Union, which is subsidizing North Vietnam, which is subsidizing the South Vietnamese insurgency that we're fighting. And enough of this, come home now. And so that was why Buckley kicked them out. And this was Griffin's same point of view in Jekyll Island, is that war is a conspiracy of evil bankers and arms dealers against the people. And so this is not that Griffin is like a tough guy, but he's certainly no hippie, right? I mean, this guy is if you can watch like the old documentaries that he did in the 60s and stuff, like this guy is the quintessential leader of the John Birch Society, Ed Griffin. And he is saying that empire is a plot against the men and women and husbands and wives and grandparents and children of this country, to destroy our country in the name of controlling the rest of the world. And, on a path to suicide. Now, to the Birches, this is all a conspiracy. This was all deliberate. The only way to destroy America is through this imperialism. And when I finally grew up was when I decided that, it's really not deliberate. It's just that all empires fall because the people who run them are a bunch of narrow-minded, short-sighted, arrogant jerks, just like the W. Bush administration that we have right now. Dick Cheney wasn't trying to run America into the ground. He just did. And that's, how it actually goes. But anyway, and then Ron Paul came to town, Bob, in 1997. And I knew my Ron Paul moment was in 1997. And you may have heard me tell this story before, where he's holding up papers on the floor of the House of Representatives in the middle of the night on C-SPAN. Mr. Speaker, I have here from the British papers today, story about how George Bush was selling chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein leading up until the invasion of Kuwait. What the hell is this? And then we went and fight. Now we're fighting to contain Iraq. We're bombing Iraq from these bases in Saudi, threatening terrorism against the American people, all to contain a guy who used to work for us. And not only that, but he used to work for us so closely, we armed him with chemical weapons. Maybe, or Mr. Speaker, we need to reconsider having this confrontational interventionist foreign policy in the first place. And I'm like, holy crap. And then, Bob, it says at the bottom of the screen, Ron Paul, R, Texas.
Yeah.
And see, I had heard him on the radio. I heard him on the Raleigh James show on KLBJ in 96, and they were arguing about the newsletters, but I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And it made no impression on me. I didn't know who he was. I only remember that later. This was the first time I actually was ever introduced to the guy. The first time I ever seen him. And he's saying that. And then probably the next time I saw him was when he was on Washington Journal, the C-SPAN morning show. And they said, well, aren't you concerned that your anti-government rhetoric will lead to another Oklahoma City bombing? And he goes, oh, I don't know. All my constituents are far more afraid of being blown up by the government, like what happened at Waco. And they went bananas. And I'm like, oh, I love this guy. And then my later very good friend, William Norman Grigg, was the editor of the New American, the John Birch's magazine at the time. And he covered Ron constantly, Dr. Paul, constantly. And so like that was the sort of Birch type, very populist Republicans were always sort of half of Dr. Paul's constituency, with us libertarians being the other half. And he kind of had both of those. And they just absolutely worshiped him. Well, as close as they could. He was in their pantheon with George Washington the same way he is to me. You know what I mean? But to answer your question, then, that is all great right-wing inoculation for it's okay to be anti-war. And then when I found antiwar.com and I realized that Pat Buchanan wrote for antiwar.com, well, whatever. You see how and I took the course in junior college. I say this all the time. I studied it for one semester, so I know it's the most important thing in the whole wide world. Social psychology. What are the guys going to think about what they think I think? And that just means everything to people, man. And Bob, if everywhere you went, people just thought that you were a pinko commie because you were a non-interventionist, that would just become the part of your philosophy that you play up the least, right? Like it just gets you nowhere. And nobody wants to listen to you talk about money anymore because they just think you hate America. Right. But dude, if you can run around with Ron and you can run around with Pat and you can run around with Tucker Carlson now, and they're all anti-war. If you can run around with Robert Higgs, he's not asking you to move left, right? Justin Raimondo is not asking you to move left. Justin Raimondo is asking you to move right. Justin Raimondo is a crusty old Archie Bunker from Queens who wants, build the wall now. Go Ann Coulter, go. That's Justin Raimondo, the editorial director of Antiwar.com. Why does he love Pat Buchanan and hate war so much? Because of what a right-wing patriot he is.
So there, right? And I got exposed to all of this just right at the turn of the century, right when it mattered the most. All these other people were so stuck in, I guess I have to follow W. Bush or else I'm left with Michael Moore.
Right.
And I don't want to be Michael Moore, so I guess I'm with W. Bush. And that was why Dr. Paul was so important when he ran in 2008. And he never explicitly said this, but it was absolutely implicit every time he said anything, was, look at me. I'm a Methodist. I'm a German stock, white Protestant Texas Republican politician. And I'm anti-war and like very anti-war and got really good, very confident arguments against interventionism. And I'll teach you too. And people just said, oh, okay. I don't have to be with Michael Moore. I can be with this guy. And now, it's only like the most weirdly backhanded of compliments, but Dr. Paul's flaw is that he's too kind. He's just too sweet of a guy. When you look at him, you might think he's 5'9". He's actually 6'1". He actually is like a baseball jock and like a alpha dog, but he's just a baby doctor and he's such a sweet guy. And he's too sweet. What we needed then was one step higher than that, or more to that same point, was Donald Trump to come. And now I know Donald Trump drops a lot of bombs on a lot of people, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the things that he said. Very, very anti-war things, including like rants against the military-industrial complex and its corruption in Washington that go far beyond anything Dwight Eisenhower ever said. Oh, they love war. They love war for the money. They make money. Lockheed in them. Oh, they love the money so much. They love war. That's Donald Trump talking. We should have never been in Afghanistan. That's the dumbest damn war in the world. Rah, 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 rah. That's Donald Trump. So if Donald Trump can say, when George W. Bush went to the Middle East, that was the worst decision any American president ever made. Well, then, Bob, your right flank is covered, pal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is no longer hippie crap. That is no longer anti-American. That's what people who love America say. We should not have done this. We shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. And it was great patriots like Pat and Ron that told us so in the first place too, way before the fact. And then after the fact, people can just, it's too hard to ignore. Yeah, the sitting vice president is an Iraq War II vet who says we never should have done that. Right? It's not Tom Cotton sitting up there who ran on the war that he loves so much and wishes he could go back. It's a guy who says we should have never done that, is, almost the standard bearer of the party right now.
Yeah, great stuff there. Well, why don't we just go ahead and, since you kind of set the table, what are your thoughts right now with, it's astonishing to me how much Trump is squandering, all that legitimacy he had with certain quarters and whatnot. How do you see things moving forward from this point?
Oh man, I don't know. It's going to be exciting.
I mean, let me just, it's so bad. I was joking, but recently when he came out criticizing Massey for getting remarried, I don't know if you saw that one.
I did, yeah.
And I retweeted it and I said, no, I got it, guys. Trump knows the only way to save the republic is by having Massey win, but he can't throw his own VP under the bus. So he's just attacking Massey like a lunatic to engender sympathy for him. That's what's going on. It's 90, And at first I said it as a joke, but then later I was like, that could possibly be right, because that's just as plausible as that. No, he thought that was a good thing to post. Yeah.
I mean, for a guy who's on his third wife and just trades them in when they get too old and ugly, you know what I mean? Talking about a guy who his wife died a year and a half ago. Like, I don't know, man. I think he mourned his old lady like fairly enough, like within the rules.
Right. I'm just even just saying in terms of like Trump reading the room and just knowing that like lots of people were coming forward and just saying, no, this isn't cool. You know what I mean? Like he really misjudged that one. So
and look, it's just his instinct, man. He's just a bully. It usually works for him. It sometimes doesn't. But
in terms of his policy overall, I'm very glad that all of it has come to such a head within the first year here. Just everything is laid so bare. You know, they say there's a civil war on the right. You have a lot of right wingers who are upset with Israel and don't want to support Israel anymore. You don't really have them trying to kick all the Zionists out. What you have is the Zionists trying to kick them out, trying to say anybody in the Republican Party who doesn't want to stay on board for this thing, they've all got to go. And the thing is, it's just like, speaking of reading the room, like, actually, no, the people are with Tucker. The people, you know, those same Ron Paul hall passes that he's been handing out since 2008, people have been taking them and leaving the room. You know what I mean? They're gone. And after all this, and, you know, America first is such a basic kind of a concept. You don't have to be very sophisticated to understand the promise there. We have problems here in this country, problems that, for one thing, require money to fix, like major problems with infrastructure, roads and bridges and dams and electricity and basic internet services for people who live out in the countryside, and God knows what other problems that we have, like just in terms of just basic quality of life in this country. And, you know, all kinds of people in different sectors and different regions and whatever who cannot find meaningful work or, you know, meaningful in terms of real pay that they can support a family on or any kind of thing. You know, all these problems, and yet somehow the government always has enough money to spend on military bases in Japan and bunker buster bombs for Israel and, you know, more anti-aircraft missiles for Ukraine and whatever it is. And people just know those weapon systems are incredibly expensive. What's a few $1 billion to your town? A lot, you know? And people just know, they feel just without having all the details, without grasping the depth of it all. They just like know in their gut that this is all at their expense in a way that they can feel it. That hurts. And that comes obviously with the contempt that people who continue to use us this way. After all, that's our money. They're not saying like, hey, give us free money. This is our money that they're taking from us and giving to other people. And, you know, I'm projecting my contempt onto the other Americans also who feel this way, you know, and people are desperate and they're looking for enemies, and then they can tell, maybe they don't know all exactly how it works, but they can tell that the reason things are so screwed up is because of the government. It's not like society was like bumbling along as this free system, and then freedom, you know, like in the mythology of the 20s, and then freedom just got all jammed up and needed the strong hand of the government to fix it or whatever. Everybody knows government's in charge of everything. Everybody knows they destroy the currency. Everybody knows they wage unlimited wars. Everybody knows they pass $7-8 trillion budgets every year that they absolutely cannot pay for at the expense of our children, grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the kind of stuff that you don't have to be very politically educated or savvy or partisan or any kind of thing to know and feel and resent. And then especially when it's America first. You know, W. Bush didn't run on America first. You know what I mean? He's George Bush's son. Obama didn't run on America first. He did run on being the opposite of Bush, whatever that is. But America first, man, you can't just be like, well, I have my fingers crossed. What I meant was Israel instead. What I meant was turn your pockets inside out. Somebody else has first claim on what you've earned. And people are going to just take that as a slap in the face. And you can see how, you know, from the top down, the Zionists are trying to shame and smear everyone into staying on board for this thing. But it's just not going to work. It's backfiring more and more. I was just on with Josie, the redheaded libertarian. She was saying she's Catholic. And more she's getting these narratives from, I guess, from Protestant Christians more than Zionist Jews, but I'm not exactly sure. But like anti-Catholic narratives saying, well, yeah, anti-Semitism is baked into Catholicism. You know how they are. Because what? Because so many Catholics said one cross thing about Israel, And now like to jihad against like 20% of the population of the United States are like, they hate us. What? Like, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, that's not good for Israel to just go around screeching enemy at anyone who looks at you funny or questions the absolute criminal means that this state uses to achieve their ends. This is just absolutely self-destructive behavior on their part. And so the tide is with us. I mean, and it's because of Netanyahu. It's not because of anti-Semitism. It's because for people who don't know the very short backstory here, Netanyahu was out, but he had to get back into power to stay out of prison because he's going to prison because he took $250,000 in bribes. And he's a felon. He's a criminal and he's caught red-handed. So he had to get back into power.
Do you mind expanding on that just a little bit? Because I think
Yeah.
people know he's like, as Trump even said, oh, yeah, they should leave that guy alone. But
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know what exactly are his legal issues.
Oh, yeah, no, it's just absolute letter of the law stuff. Taking $250,000 in champagne and fine cigars, and I don't know if it's cars and jewelry. It's mostly for his wife, for his absolute tyrant of a wife, Sarah Netanyahu, who demands fine watches and necklaces and fur coats and the finest champagne and all these things from the people all around them, and including in other countries, including Americans and Brits and other people are made to pay these tributes to her. And they're just totally caught. And there's a documentary about this that people can watch called The BB Files, where it's just, you should really watch it. You'll love it because it's just the videotapes of Shin Bet interrogating these people, including Netanyahu himself being interrogated by the National Police. That's their FBI. The Shin Bet is their FBI. Interrogating him about his crimes and interrogating including Miriam Adelson and Sheldon Adelson going, yeah, we gave him the money. All right. We had to. Like, that's how it goes. It's all in there. So in 2020, it could have been the end of 21. Forgive me if I screwed this up, Bob. I'm almost certain it's in December of 20 that Netanyahu joins into a coalition with some right-wing kooks that he never would have joined up with before. People like Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. And these guys are nuts. They are extremely far right. Their type of politics used to be outlawed in Israel as fascist by their Supreme Court. They are essentially the direct descendants of the Koch party of Meir Kahane, who was banned for being a fascist in the old days of the 70s and 80s. But Netanyahu joined with these groups in order to get his majority to become prime minister again, to stay out of prison. And so then that means that this is by far the most right-wing nationalist government that they've had there, at least since Yitzhak Shamir, maybe ever. And so once the war started on October the 7th and the 8th, then Netanyahu has had these people who are essentially National Socialists and religiously motivated supremacists, absolutely demanding that he kill everybody in Gaza as much as it takes until the rest flee. They call it voluntary emigration, but clearly the policy was to destroy the Palestinian society on the Gaza Strip in order to force them all to leave. Now, they failed in that. No other country in the world was willing to go along with this and accept the Palestinian refugees. And so, and then America even Donald Trump was not willing to let them just go ahead and kill everybody. They were, kind of limited after the first 6 months or 8 months or maybe first year. They were somewhat limited to about 100 people a day they would kill, about a Waco massacre worth of people every day. But that's not enough. It would take too long to kill 2 million people that way. So they ended up being forced to at least now call this, temporary timeout. But I say all that to explain why it is that Netanyahu waged the war against the Palestinians in Gaza the way that he did for the last 2 years. He could have gone in there and had Mossad and the IDF target the leaders of Hamas and kill them a few at a time or one at a time, even go in there and kidnap them. And they've always been able to do this. Again, for your audience, I don't know who I've spoken to about this before.
or the first time. This is not the country next door. This is an Indian reservation wholly under the control of Israel. So they absolutely did not have to wage the war in the way that they did against the population and against the infrastructure of the country. You know, a lot of the decimation, when you see the aerial footage of the Gaza Strip, a lot of that was done after people were forced to flee. So that's why the casualties are so low, actually, that they're like under 100,000 dead. They're like high tens of thousands. If you looked at the Gaza Strip, you might think that they killed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Mhm.
But what happened is they would drive the people out, and then they would still go back and bomb the entire towns to absolute rubble, destroy everything, all the schools, all the universities, all the hospitals, and all the government offices where any land records or family history records or anything like that was kept. Decimate the place. So like if people need to come up with a new kind of vocabulary word for that, or if there's another like term in German or French or whatever I'm supposed to know for like, what does it mean when you go in and completely decimate people's cities after they're gone? So it's not like just outright genocide in that way,
Right.
but it still is obviously contributing to genocide because it's an attempt to destroy the society itself, not just to kill some people. Genocide doesn't just mean widespread massacres. You could have even more people killed. Depending on the situation, it wouldn't necessarily be a genocide. But what you see here was a deliberate attempt to eradicate the people of the Gaza Strip's entire society. So they, as Netanyahu said, we are destroying all their homes so they have no homes to go back to, so that they have to leave. So that is why people have turned against Israel, because of this just ultra violence, the absolute destruction of these people and so many dead civilians. I mean, the ratio of dead civilians to fighters is far out of proportion to any comparable war in recent history, where they have deliberately targeted civilians, including children, including toddlers, including pregnant women, including, refugees just huddling in their tents, where they do this for fun. They kill them for fun. And this is, you can read it in the Israeli press, where Israeli soldiers themselves and their commanders and their politicians say they kill Palestinians for sport, for fun, when they're bored. They use them literally as human shields. They claim every time they kill a civilian, oh, well, Hamas is using those people as human shields, meaning they live in the same town as them. But whatever, whenever you see Hamas fighters from their footage, they're not surrounded by civilians. They don't use human shields. Israel literally actually uses human shields, and they have a name for it. It's called the Mosquito Protocol. You can read about it in the Israeli press, where Israeli military officers explain that they have a, quote, sub-army of Palestinian slaves, end quote, that they use to force to clear the rubble, to clear buildings for potential booby traps and whatever. And this is not Hamas enemy terrorists that they've captured and then used for these purposes. These are women and children and elderly and anybody that they force through tunnels, through rubble, to protect themselves, push them out first when they go to hide behind them, to protect them from sniper fire. I mean, literal human shields. This is why people have turned against Israel, not because of some ancient myth of witchcraft and blood libel and anti-Semitism from Eastern Europe that Americans have no association with whatsoever, not because of any Holocaust that any of our family members ever did. It was our heroes that went and stopped the German Nazis in the Second World War, you might remember, not did that. So there is no history of anti-Jewish pogroms in America ever. The only one ever was Ulysses S. Grant, and it wasn't an anti-Jewish pogrom, really. It was a specific group of slavers in South Carolina, a community of slavers that he confiscated their so-called property from them and force-marched them off and put them in jail. That's the only time. There's never, in all of the strife in New York City, there's never been an anti-Jewish pogrom in New York City or in any other city in America ever. That's not a problem in America. It has not been a problem in America, at least since the 1940s,
when Americans came home, patting themselves on the
Yeah,
back
it's
for
funny you say
stopping
that,
the
yeah.
German Nazis.
Because even like in popular American movies about stuff like that, it's, you know, Italians versus the Irish or something, like in the mob movies or Gangs in New York or
Right.
whatever. But yeah, it's not. I suppose in The Godfather, you know what? There's that one. Roth is clearly Jewish, but I mean that's not.
Yeah.
They don't dislike him because he's Jewish. They dislike him because he's
Business.
sinister.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And yeah, so that's the crisis, and the right wing is facing it, the Republican Party is facing it, just as the left wing and the liberal Democratic Party are facing it. That American support for Israel has been based on a bunch of crap this whole time, and now people just aren't buying it anymore. There never was a good reason to support them. They had to lie and lie and lie this whole time to somehow pretend that Israel is useful to the United States for doing anything other than motivating terrorist attacks against us. And people just don't believe it anymore. So they're getting pretty desperate. And it's, in a way, like kind of exciting. I don't know what's going to happen, Bob. There's a huge crack up, and it's taking place on the Democratic side more than on the Republican side. But on the Republican side, too, people are just sick and tired of being lied to and condescended to by these people. And so, you know, when it's the power elite that control both parties versus the voters of both parties in a massive country of 400 million people, like, what are they going to do, dude? I don't know what they're going to do.
it's just so ironic though, because like as of last, you know, when Trump first, you know, won his reelection, and they were, you know, the disarray the Democrats were in, you know, still trying to recover from the trans craziness, the stuff with Biden, the, you know, weekend at Bernie's candidate, and just how awful Kamala was. I mean, it just looked like, who are the Democrats? You know, like, who are they even going to run? Newsom? You know, they were in a shambles. Like, what could they possibly do to rehabilitate their party? And it was like, oh, they just need to sit back and let the Republicans go.
Yep.
And now it's a, you know, who knows what's going to happen. So it's just amazing.
I know. Same thing every time, too. That's all the Republicans had to do during the age of Joe Biden was like, well, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I don't think so. You know? So, yeah, we're pretty screwed, man. And there's not a fix coming. There's more fights coming. But for the next 3 years of Donald Trump, it's going to be Israel instead. And what that means for the base, what that means for American politics overall, and how this plays out in the midterms and the rest, who all gets blamed and what. I mean, it's going to be a hell of a fight, man. It truly is. And, you know, the unorganized masses are called that because we're unorganized masses. And the few power elite, they're called organized because they have lawyers and secretaries who can do work and get things done. If there's a state senator who needs correction, have Susie call Julie and get Bob on it, you know, and not Bob, Joe, whatever, solve it. It gets solved. It's somebody's job to solve it, and they have the money to have somebody do the thing that needs done. And that's where, you know, sentiment out in the country comes butting up against the reality of actual, you know, organized and financed power. And so, but it's like a stretch in a rubber band kind of a thing, right? Like you can only have the parties in power that far out of lockstep with the population, you know, they can only go so far and for so long before there becomes real consequences for them. Like you mentioned with the trans thing. You know, how many fingers am I holding up, Winston? The party says it's 5. You can only do that for so long before people actually would like to see you be hurt. You know what I mean? Like I hate the Democrats as much right now as I did the day they burned Waco. Right? And because of stuff like that, insisting that I accept absurdities as truth. Like actually, no. You know, and whatever. I've known trans people before. I don't have anything against them. You can be trans if you want. I don't care. You can't sit here and make me pretend to believe that a lie is true, okay? You dress up however you want. But 4 is still 4. And I think you know, I don't know. We're stuck between such absurdities on both sides. Mm-hmm. It's hard to see, you know, for me, like when I kind of Doctor Strange and try to play it out, like the different ways that this can go. I guess I'm still betting on the Republicans. I think the Democrats are just at the absolute depths of absurdity now. But then again, it could be that really overall in the culture, momentum is still with them, and that Trump was only to win over the just absolute idiocy of Kamala Harris and the entire Democratic, machine as it presented itself last time around. After all, he won in 7 states and everything, but only by a couple of 10,000 votes, right? A few tens of thousands of votes, which is a pretty narrow margin when you're talking about tens of millions of people voting. And so it actually could have gone the other way. We saw that as such a necessary and needed repudiation of the left, and especially like the liberal cultural revolution that we've been suffering since, the beginning of the Obama era, at least. But yeah, I don't know, the coalition is already breaking. There were, maybe it's true that Democrats are more willing to just swallow their pride and support their leader anyway. Although a lot of people stayed home for Hillary Clinton that voted for Obama,
Mm-hmm.
But I think Republicans are a lot more willing to punish their leaders. And I think people are already so pissed off at the way that this is going. And, something that I think really hurt Trump last week was that Laura Ingraham interview.
Oh, yeah.
Where he talked about, we just don't have any talented people. We have to replace the American population with Indians, I guess, because Americans aren't good enough to do these jobs. And,
right.
And in fact,
the economy's awesome. And I don't know what it's just liberal media is a hoax. Yeah.
Yeah. And we need Chinese people to prop up the universities to educate our Indians to take Americans' jobs from them. And whatever, and this is the populist nationalist, with the national economic program to make America great again for, Chinese and Indian nationals, not people who are actually from here. And, I don't know how he's going to come back from that. All of these things are just, and it all of them speak to, him and the entire power elite's disconnection from the American people. They don't know how hard it hurts to have to go to the grocery store right now. You know what I mean? There are people who their kids just don't get orange juice now. Well, that really matters. Kids need nutrition. There are people who are going without. There are people who are not just eating hot dogs instead of hamburgers, but they're eating peanut butter crackers instead of hot dogs. They're not getting, they're not able to provide the standard of living for their people, especially people who are responsible for other people. The stress of going to the store and seeing these prices are just absolutely out of control. And then, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. If anybody just heard me on the last show I was on right before yours, same thing. But I know you and I have talked about this before over the years, Bob, that when we have massive price inflation on TV, the people with all the power and who got all the free money first, they always blame wage earners for finally getting a raise. And they get a cost of living increase and they go, all this upward pressure on wages is going to cause inflation.
Yeah.
And it's somebody get me my crucifix so I can nail these people to it. It's so unfair. And because real wages, I don't know, I bet you have the graph that show how long does it take before real wages catch up with price inflation when that rubber band stretches? It takes a long time. I know that you get a quarter or 50-cent raise a year or some kind of thing like that. This makes no mark compared to the price inflation that we're going through now. So you have people really going through massive stress and essentially just being talked down to by people who are just, they're immune, right? I mean, if you make a certain amount of money a year, your grocery bill, you might not even notice that it's gone up. You know what I mean? Depending on what your margin is, that
I think anybody who actually does their own shopping is going to notice it, but you're right. For people above a certain level, it's not, they're not going to change what they buy. It's just going to be wow, that's expensive,
Right. And people above a certain level don't do their own shopping at all.
Right. So they literally won't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Donald Trump, I think he, I guess he's supposed to have this imagination to grapple with I don't know, what some guy's going through on the outskirts of Little Rock right now, and whether he can make it or not. But how is Trump supposed to know? He can't know. He's just too far removed from people's real lives, you know?
Yeah. All right. Well, all the more reason people need to take your course. So can you tell them where do they go to get to the academy?
Yeah, thanks. That was kind of clumsy segue there, Bob, but I don't know what I would have done better, honestly. Yes, America is screwed up. And so learn how screwed we are, everybody, by going to the Scott Horton Academy.
Yes.
No, we need, honestly, there's a real purpose in this. We're really trying to train up an army of not just libertarians, but of everybody to be good enough on this stuff that you don't just have to, you're not just like inoculated. Sorry for my bad choice of term there. You're not just protected from like the pressure to fall in line and believe in these things, but that we can all debunk them ourselves. Like we can all like hold our own. I am just a cab driver, skateboarder kid from Austin. I didn't go to fancy pants college. I don't speak any foreign languages. I never been to the old world. This is the kind of stuff that anybody can do if I can do it. It's as simple as that, dude. It's just a matter of getting yourself a good grudge and figuring out who's responsible for it and how we can stick it to them. And, you know, if you've ever seen me or Dave or anybody really go up against the war party on TV or on any of these big YouTube shows where we always win because we're right and they're not. So
and they're just not even used to someone challenging them on that dimension. You know what I mean? Like they're used to someone saying, well, I was thinking we could do, you know, cruise missile strikes as opposed to boots on the ground. Like that's usually what the argument is.
That's right. But we get in there and we go, no, because of this and this and this, and they're helpless. Basically, we win every time. So that's all we're trying to do is we're trying to train up an army of me's to go out there and be able to argue this stuff about as well as I can. And just so that nobody feels like they gotta feel the pressure to believe in this stuff anymore. You know, I get notes from people almost every day, certainly like once a week. I get, well, I don't know, man. On average, I bet maybe 2 or 3 a month. I get notes from veterans, either, you know, tweets or emails of people going, man, you know, you changed my whole life, me and my whole family now. We're all like you and Ron Paul because of this stuff. I heard you on Dave's show or I heard you on Tom's show. And now I read your book and my old dad, boy, he was a Reaganite and a hawk, but he ain't anymore now. And, you know, I get these a lot. Guys who did 2 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq and whatever, they come home. They're desperate for reasons why all this is going on. This is the most important part of their life. And they don't know what it was for. They don't even know what the hell is going on. And they're looking for somebody to tell them the truth. And so then they're grateful that they found a place where somebody will just tell them the truth. So that's what I'm doing here, man, is it's, you know, a lot of people just like the edification and knowing the truth, but a lot of people like to really join up the fight. And so that's really the purpose of this, is giving people a place where they can feel confident by the end that like, I'm ready to go ahead and get into these arguments now. I'm ready to tangle with this and win this. Because, I mean, to me, it's the greatest emergency. If we can't end the world empire, we are doomed, dude. There's no paying off this debt. There's no rolling back the state in any way until we end the world empire first. And if we don't do those things, I'm terrified to ask you what it really look like if we got to stop. We have to start chopping zeros off our dollars and have a real currency crisis in this country, and a real crack up for
because it's
using to stop.
We're going to lose the world empire one way or the other. It's just, do we want to do it like quote voluntarily or just have it collapse?
Exactly right. So that's why. I mean, this is all important. That's why I've spent my whole career on this, is on foreign policy. This is the worst thing about America. We have to knock it off before it ruins all that's left good about it. And so that's the point of it. It's me and other really great guests. You really want to understand Israel-Palestine? Learn it from Ramsey Baroud about who's persecuting who and who's occupying who over there, and get caught up. So that's it. And by the way, so for the lifetime subscribers, you get a free copy of my book, Enough Already, about the Middle East wars. And you also get a nice little notepad and pen and a card from me and this kind of thing. We're doing monthly Q&A sessions live with me and or other guests and all that for the lifetime subscribers. And anybody who's it's late and I can't talk right. Anybody who subscribes between now and Thanksgiving and uses the promo code Bob will save 10%.
There you go.
How do you like that? ScottHortonAcademy.com.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott, for everything you've been doing. And folks, this is going to be great stuff here. Scott, thanks so much for setting up the course, writing all the books, and coming here and telling us about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.